The desert sun burned without mercy that day, baking the small frontier town of Red Hollow into silence. The only sound was the rattling of metal, chains striking against iron bars as the prisoner shifted in his cell. He was an Apache warrior, tall, broad-shouldered, his hair long and matted with dust, his wrists bruised from the shackles that bound him. The townsfolk called him a savage, a murderer, a ghost of the wild who deserved no mercy. But to Clara Bennett, the young woman who brought water to the jail each morning, he was something else. A man broken by injustice, a spirit caged by fear. Clara was the sheriff's niece, known for her kindness, her quiet strength, and her belief that people could still choose goodness, even in a world as cruel as this one. Yet when she saw the Apache behind those bars, something in her heart twisted with unease, not from fear, but from recognition. He didn't belong there. The first time she spoke to him, he didn't answer. He just stared at her with those piercing eyes that held the weight of 1,000 storms. The second time, he whispered a name. Taza. It was all he said, and it lingered in her thoughts like a haunting wind. Days turned to weeks, and Clara found herself sneaking food and clean water into the cell when no one was watching. She learned little by little that Taza had not killed anyone. He was captured while trying to save his people's children from being taken by traitors, but no one wanted to hear that story. The sheriff planned to sell him to the army outpost in Tucson, a bounty exchange. Clara's conscience screamed against it. One evening, when the town gathered for a dance, she crept to the jail with trembling hands and a stolen key. The moonlight cut across the dusty floor as she unlocked the cell. Taza stood there silent, his chains clinking softly. He could have run without a word, but instead he looked at her and said, "Why?" Clara's heart raced. "Because you don't belong in a cage," she whispered. The moment he stepped into the open air, the night seemed to breathe again. But in freeing him, Clara had crossed a line that could never be undone. By dawn, Red Hollow discovered what she'd done. The sheriff's rage was thunderous. The men formed a posse before breakfast. They would hunt her for betrayal and him for vengeance. Clara fled on horseback, her dress whipping in the desert wind. And by noon she found Taza waiting at the canyon ridge, as if he'd known she'd come. "You can't go back," he told her. "They'll kill you." "Then neither of us can," she replied, her eyes steady. They rode together into the wild, two souls hunted by both sides. To the settlers, she was a traitor. To the Apache, she was a threat. But in that harsh desert, something unspoken began to form between them. Trust, born of desperation, and a strange kind of love born from danger. They camped beneath the stars, speaking in fragments, learning each other's worlds. She told him of her father's death at the hands of raiders, and he told her of his people's hunger, their land stolen, their children taken. They were from opposite worlds, but both wounded by the same cruelty. Still, freedom was not peace. At night she would see the glow of torches in the distance, the posse closing in. Each day they survived felt borrowed, and each glance they shared carried a question neither dared to ask. What price will freedom demand? Clara had once believed freedom meant doing what was right. But now, as the desert grew darker and the walls of the world closed in, she began to see that sometimes freedom meant choosing who you would fight beside, even if it meant losing everything. The days that followed were carved out of fire and fear. Clara and Taza rode through the canyons where the rocks whispered of old wars, their shadows long and unbroken. They found shelter in an abandoned mission, its walls crumbling but sacred, a forgotten refuge in a land that forgave nothing. There they began to rebuild themselves. Clara learned to track footprints in sand, to gather water from cactus roots, to listen, truly listen, to the silence that carried the truth of the desert. Taza taught her how to survive. But he also taught her something far deeper, that freedom without belonging is just another kind of cage. "You freed me," he said one night as the fire flickered between them. "But now you are shackled too." She looked up, tears catching the light. "Then we'll break the chains together." But the world would not let them. Word spread quickly across territories, the Apache fugitive, and the white woman who helped him escape. To the settlers, it was betrayal of blood. To the Apache tribes, it was suspicion. Even Taza's own people doubted his loyalty, believing he had been bewitched by the woman who should have been his enemy. They came for him under the full moon, silent, armed, faces painted with the sorrow of war. Clara woke to the sound of shouts, fire, and the clash of steel. Taza stepped into the light, his hands raised, shouting in his native tongue that she meant no harm. But one of the warriors struck him down, and Clara's scream tore through the night like a knife. She ran to him, shielding him with her body, her voice trembling. "If you want his life, you'll take mine too." Her bravery froze them. For a heartbeat, even the desert seemed to hold its breath. Then an old chief stepped forward, his gaze heavy with wisdom. "She gave him freedom," he said. "Now she gives him her spirit. Let them go." The warriors withdrew, and for a fleeting moment it seemed peace had returned. But in Red Hollow, peace was a dream the living couldn't afford. The posse caught their trail soon after, led by the sheriff himself, Clara's uncle, face hardened by grief and fury. When he found them at the mission, his gun was already drawn. "You've disgraced this town," he roared. "That savage killed our men." Clara stood between the barrel and Taza. "He didn't," she said, voice trembling. "We did. We killed their people, took their land, and now we blame them for surviving." The sheriff's hand shook. "Move aside, Clara." "No." The silence that followed was unbearable. Then, with a cry that was half fury, half despair, the sheriff lowered his gun. "Then go," he said. "Go before I change my mind." Clara and Taza left the ruins of Red Hollow behind, disappearing into the horizon. Two outlaws in love, two souls bound by something no law could touch. They built a small life in the mountains, hidden from the world that hated them both. Sometimes travelers passing through would speak of a woman and a man who lived beyond the ridges, helping lost wanderers find their way. They said she had golden hair and a heart of fire, and he had eyes that could tame a storm. Whether it was truth or legend, no one knew for sure. But the story of the woman who freed the shackled Apache and chose love over fear became something that lived on in whispers and campfire tales. Because sometimes freedom isn't found in the open plains or behind the bars of law. It's found in the choice to stand beside someone, even when the whole world stands against you.